Hello again, college football fans. It is Monday, October 2nd, and we are still in the wake of the Week 5 goings on in college football. Obviously, Alabama went to Starkville and dealt with the Cowbells once again for our semi annual event there. And I have to say, it worked out better than I was hoping for. I had no realistic fears that we would lose that ball game, but I did think that there was a possibility that we would struggle to win it, and then it would wind up going, well into the fourth quarter before we gained total control of that ball game. But luckily for us, we managed to gain total control by halftime of that ball game, and it had that retro feel about it. Everything about it. Nick Saban's demeanor, which I've heard a lot of people talking about. I've heard a lot of theories as to why Nick Saban had more of that fire on the sideline that we were used to seeing years ago. And the Miss Terry story was funny and everything. But my theory as to why Nick Saban was so animated and so apt to bark at the players Saturday. Gary Danielson is the only announcer that seems to have figured this out. I've noticed the pattern early in the Nick Saban era at Alabama that he seemed to be more fussy on the sidelines, for lack of a better word, than in the games where we were dominating and expected to win and playing inferior opponents. And like I said, Gary Danielson really picked up on that well several years ago. And my theory as to why we haven't seen that a lot in the last few years, probably since 2008, just about the time that our offense took over the dominant role in the football team. The offense was the part of the team that was better. It was the part of the team that was controlling football games, and it was the part of the team that we relied on to win ball games for those years. And that's not Saban's comfort zone. That's not his expertise. He's not as familiar with offensive stuff. I think he kind of has to rely on his other coaches a little bit more for that side of the ball. And I think that's one of the reasons why he wasn't quite as animated on the sidelines. That and the fact that we've just played a lot of close games over the last couple of years. And he just, in close games that he knows that his team is having a fight, games that he knows that the other team has comparable talent, and he knows that it's going to be an actual game, he calms down and there's more positive reinforcement on the sideline, less barking, less fussing. And I think that this might be the first time in a while that he's felt really confident in his defense, and he realizes that he can rely on it, that it's the part of the team, once again, that's going to win football games for us and control ball games for us. And I mean, that's what Saban wants more than anything, is to control the game. And, so that had a retro feel. Another vintage aspect of this game was the way the defense played. Non-offensive touchdowns. It was so great to see us get one. We haven't, that hasn't been a huge feature of our defense over the last 5-6 seasons, and obviously that was a big feature of our defenses in the early part of the Nick Saban era at Alabama. So it was really good to see that happen. Chris Braswell's pick six was beautiful. We just overwhelmed their offense for much of the game, and the feeling of the games. I had almost forgotten what it feels like when the defense is your dominant part of your football team, because the swings can happen so quickly. When the offense was running the show, it was conventional and kind of a predictable lead build. You get your 7, you let them go get their 3 or their nothing, then you get your 7 more, and so on, and rinse and repeat as many times as you want to, and suddenly you've won the ball game by a comfortable margin. But when it's the defense, things can seem a little bit hairy there. Like, the early part of that ball game, it seemed like we might, my fears about how we might have to struggle to win this ball game were coming true a little bit. And then, we put together a good drive with Jalen Milroe running the ball, and then bam, just like that, we get another touchdown from the defense. All of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, it's 14-0. We're in total control of the ball game. Then, another lull happens. Mississippi State gathers their sea legs a little bit. They pull the game within a score or 10 points or something like that. And then all of a sudden we put together another drive, got a Jace McClellan touchdown, and then boom, another interception. And then right after that, we score off of that interception. And just like that, We've gone from being in a tight game in the first half to being up 31-10 at halftime, and at that point, everybody knew that everything was all over but the shouting. And then, we went into the second half, got 3 field goals, dominated defensively. We did allow them to get that one touchdown there on their first possession of the second half, but it didn't scare anybody, it didn't worry anybody, and it certainly didn't take control of the ball game away from Alabama. And about those field goals, it's about time for me to give some praise to Will Reichard and our whole kicking staff right now is lights out. I think this may be the best kicker punter combination that Nick Saban's ever had at Alabama. James Burnip is not getting the same kind of love that J.K. Scott got when he was our punter, but I feel like he's right at that level. I don't know if he's as good or better. We'll have to make those determinations when his career is over. But for right now, oh boy, I love what he's doing at punter. Will Reichard is obviously a veteran. We're very fortunate that he decided to come back for his senior year because he looks better than ever. I mean, I'm as confident as I've ever been as an Alabama fan when a field goal attempt is being made. So big shout out and big props to Will Reichard and James Burnip because the kind of team that we are, definitely shaping up to be a running ball control type team more so than lighting up the scoreboards with the pass game. That's imperative that you have a good punter and a good kicker, and we do have both, and they're going to complement what we do on offense very, very well. And hopefully we won't have to worry about those horrible stretches where we can't seem to make a kick in these tight games, because they're coming. And maybe next week is going to be one of those games. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Just an overall offensive continued improvement. They're not where we want them to be yet. The biggest issue is the big issue that we've had for the last couple of years, and that is that the running game is just not where we like it to be at Alabama. It's fine, it's not bad, but we like it to be better than fine and not bad. And I mentioned last week about I love Roydell and I love Jase McClellan. I think they're both very good running backs. But the problem is, first of all, I don't think they have the best vision of running backs that I've ever seen. They both have a tendency to kind of run right into the scrum, maybe miss some holes. I'm no expert or anything, but these are just things that I notice watching these ball games. And another big problem, and this has been a problem for the last 2 years, which is when it's time to get one of those crucial clutch, like 3rd and short, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, either it's going to keep a drive going or it's going to be the difference in a field goal try and continuing a drive, no matter what the situation is, whether it's we're trying to come back in a game or whether we're trying to put the final nail in the coffin at the end of the game, where we would be able to do that with a touchdown or at least more time being taken off the clock. But those moments where we just really got to have that clutch hard, where everybody in the stadium knows you're going to run it and you get the first down anyway, both of those guys just seem to have trouble doing that. And I think we've got enough of a sample size from both of them now. They're veteran guys. They've been there since 2020, both of them. I know they had some injury issues, but those injuries are far in their rearview mirror at this point. So I don't have a lot of confidence that they're going to improve that much. I think they are what they are. And that being said, I want to see more Justice Haynes. I mentioned it last week. I want to see more Justice Haynes in more not necessarily critical situations, but not garbage time. Legitimate playing time as a full-time member of the offense, not just a backup, not just a guy that comes in for garbage time, because he got his 4 carries during garbage time in that Mississippi State game. And I mean, I know that's not a big sample size, but he had the best carry average for any of the running backs. He had the best run, the longest run, and the best looking run. And he did that sort of like cartwheel thing. That's just more athleticism than I've seen out of the other 2. And I just have a feeling that, if we do have a guy that's a special running back on the bench, it's that guy. And I just want to see him in there in more significant playing time during these games. I mean, if we find ourselves in a situation next week against A&M where maybe a quarter and a half has gone by and we're having trouble establishing the run, I would really like to see Nick Saban give him a chance. I think it's time. I mean, we're at week 6, right? I mean, I've heard Saban say this before. I know it's not at the end of the season yet, but by the end of seasons for freshmen, they're not freshmen anymore. And I think it's time for him to get his sea legs and get in there and see what he can do in significant moments in the game. And so that's one way that we can improve, hopefully. And another way, and I see this happening already, I see Milroe developing some chemistry with some receivers. Amari Niblack was great against Mississippi State. I don't think he's gotten enough credit so far this season. He had a great touchdown against Texas. He had a pretty good game. He might have had 2 touchdowns. He had at least 1 touchdown in the opener against Middle Tennessee. And so, they were the announcing team during the game Saturday night was, they were singing the same song that we've heard last year and a half now, that Alabama just doesn't have anybody on the perimeter. And yeah, I know Niblack's not necessarily a perimeter guy, but I do think he's a big-time receiver, and I think he's a big-time mismatch in that hybrid sort of wide receiver tight end spot that's become popular in the last few years. And I like the chemistry that I've seen between him and Milroe. We didn't get to see a Jalen Hale reception, but he was targeted a couple of times. Once on a deep ball, but it was kind of sailed over his head, which I guess would have been on Milroe and not so much him as to why he didn't make that catch. But, this brings me to another X factor about our offense, which is, Alabama is due a breakout performance from one of our offensive skill guys. I mean, it's been a long time since anybody just burst onto the scene, especially that wasn't, named Bryce Young or Jameson Williams, that, had a game where you're like, oh yeah, that's what we want, and we want more of that, and that guy has the potential to be one of the guys. And so, candidates for that right now, we've seen flashes. We've seen lots of flashes from guys like Isaiah Bond, Kendrick Law, Kobe Prentice. He's kind of faded recently. Kobe Prentice, that is. I think Jermaine Burton, we know what he is, and he's a great, good receiver, but he's not the guy kind of guy. Now, Ja'Corey Brooks, I think, might fall into that category as well. But candidates for breakout receivers, I think the best 2, obviously, I've already mentioned Amari Niblack and Jalen Hale, but don't sleep on Malik Benson. He's a transfer. He got a lot of good press and a lot of good talk about him in the offseason, and obviously he hasn't really contributed too much yet, but he did get a good catch. I think he got the longest reception of the night against Mississippi State, and it takes a while to work into that sort of thing. And so I feel confident that somebody is going to step up and be our perimeter guy, our Amari Cooper, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley type of guy. And so that's pretty much everything I have to say about the game that we played Saturday. I want to talk a little bit more about just the rest of college football. There's this perception right now that the SEC is down, which could be true. I understand why they're saying that. It's because both Alabama's been down for a minute now by their standards, and Georgia hasn't looked like the world beaters that they've been the last couple of years so far this season. But, as far as Georgia goes, I didn't have a lot. I mean, I was beating the Georgia's overrated drum early in the season, and now everybody seems to be beating that drum louder because of what they did at Auburn. I think what they did at Auburn gives me more confidence in that team. Players talk about this a lot, and coaches and announcers that used to be players, about how championship teams need games like that where they are put in the fire, forged in fire. I mean, as an Alabama fan, and Alabama people can tell you better than anyone, Jordan-Hare Stadium is a tough place to win, and I don't care what kind of team Auburn has. If they have a good team, it's nearly impossible to win in there. And even if they have a bad team, it's tough to win. I mean, this game that Georgia played reminded me a lot of the Iron Bowl a couple years ago, when we struggled and struggled and struggled until the very, very end of the game. And our best player, Bryce Young, made the play that he had to make to secure a victory for us, and that's exactly what Georgia did Saturday. Their best player, Brock Bowers, made the play that he had to make at the end of the game to secure the victory for Georgia, and now I feel more confident about them moving forward. A lot of people are picking Kentucky to give them trouble. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Georgia's being, tested, battle tested now. Their quarterback grew up in that game, and I know he didn't have an outstanding, great statistical game, but he made a couple throws that they had to have him make, and they were tough throws. I remember there was one part of that game where their receiver was running a crossing route. It was third and pretty far to go. They were in the red zone, and if they don't get it, it would have had to have been a field goal attempt. And everybody in the stadium knew they were going to throw. Auburn brought an all-out blitz. They had a safety, I believe, untouched, just running full speed towards him. He made the throw. The running back bobbled it a little bit, but caught it. And, those sort of completions really do a lot to help the confidence of young quarterbacks. And so Kentucky, don't get caught in the Kentucky trap that people have been caught in the last several years. They have a backloaded schedule. We all know that. And I think what's happened is, and I don't want to take anything away. I think Mark Stoops has done an incredible job at Kentucky. I think getting them to 7, 8, 9, they may have even got 10 wins. I can't really remember. But I know he's kept them at that 7, 8, 9 win mark every year. That's phenomenal at Kentucky. That is, you want your coach to get the best potential out of the program that he can get. And I feel like Mark Stoops has been doing that. And I would certainly not be too upset if Nick Saban retired at the end of this year and Mark Stoops was the guy that they wound up getting, because I like the way he runs programs. I think he knows how to build programs in the SEC. He's proven that. But just don't get caught up in this notion that Kentucky is going to compete for the SEC East. It's not going to happen, y'all. And you're going to see that next week, because they're going to try to line up and out Georgia, and they're not going to be able to do it. And I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia smacked them around real good in that ball game. I've got notes. I don't know if you've noticed. I've been looking down at my notes. This is the first time I've ever tried to use notes on these, but I got a lot to say this week, I think. And so we talked about Georgia and Kentucky. And the thing about Kentucky, I think the reason we've been caught in this trap thinking that they might be better than they are the last few years is not so much that we're giving them too much credit. We're giving Florida too much credit. Florida, y'all, they're garbage right now. They are the only two SEC programs that I say clearly have a worse program right now than Florida are Vanderbilt, because Vandy's Vandy, and Mississippi State. And last year I wouldn't have said that. I wouldn't have said that until the day that Mike Leach died, because that was a great thing that they had going for them at Mississippi State. But traditionally, Mississippi State is just not. They're a bottom feeder in the SEC, and I expected them to go back to that position after Mike Leach died, and that is exactly what has happened. So right now, Florida, they're battling with State and Vandy for who's the second or third worst team in the conference, and they've kind of been in that situation for a minute, y'all. It's been a minute since Urban Meyer's been there, and as a history lesson, that's kind of Florida's position in the SEC historically. They're definitely a middle of the pack at best, probably the lower part of that middle pack historically in the SEC. They never won an SEC championship until 1991, y'all. I mean, so they might be, settling back into their traditional role in the SEC, and we're just having a hard time catching up to that because they had so much success with Spurrier and Urban Meyer for pretty good while, and there was only a little. There was the Ron Zook experiment in between those coaches, so it felt like they were really great for a long time, and they were. But we might need to be, and I don't want to write off Billy Napier just yet, because he could turn that thing around if they don't fire him after this year, which I don't think they will, unless they've got a blockbuster guy in the pipeline down there. I don't think they'll do that. But anyway, that's why I believe that that Kentucky has been thought of as an actual contender in the East when they managed to rattle off several wins early in the season, and one of them's Florida. But just don't get caught up on that. I expect Georgia to handle business pretty well against Kentucky next week. Missouri's intriguing. I think Missouri's definitely more intriguing to me than Kentucky because they've proven that they can win the SEC East. Granted, it was very down when they did it, but they have proven there's provenance there, you know. And I like their coach. I like Drinkwitz a lot. I like their defense. I love their quarterback, and I think they have the best receiver in Luther Burden in the conference. So I would still be surprised if they beat LSU next week, but I wouldn't be nearly as surprised as if Kentucky even came close to beating Georgia. On to the West, you know, Auburn, they're improving. You know, I'm not gonna get too high on what they were able to do against Georgia. You know, a lot of that's Jordan Hare. It just is. And but I do expect Hugh Freeze to get them turned around. And there's a good chance that they'll beat somebody that they're not supposed to this year. I just hope it's not us. LSU, I'm not ready to write them off just yet. I mean, their defense, I know their defense gave up ungodly amounts of yardages and points. But sometimes, especially this day and age in college football, you just get caught up into those games. And it was a hot, you know, Lane was hot calling plays. Jackson Dart was hot at quarterback. And when you run into a really good quarterback and a really good O coordinator, which that basically is what, I mean, he's the head coach, but I think he's also the offensive coordinator as well. Definitely the play caller. And when you get two guys like that are hot, you know, sometimes you just get caught in those games. And they weren't able to keep up. And lost right there at the, you know, had a chance to win at the end, but wasn't able to pull it off. So I'm not quite ready to write off LSU just yet. You know, the state of the game right now, offensively and defensively. A couple years ago, I was really on board with the whole defense no longer wins championships, offense wins championships. I've kind of pumped the brakes on that a little bit. Defense has made a bit of a comeback this year, and I think most of that is because of the new clock thing, the clock rule that they came up with about, you know, it's only the last 2 minutes of a half where they stop the clock for first downs now. And so that's not giving offenses nearly as many opportunities. I mean, there for a minute, the two big rules or the big rule that made offenses, to me, almost unstoppable, if it was a good one, was the O-lineman. They changed that rule from where the O-lineman could go 3 yards downfield, 5 yards downfield as opposed to 3 yards. That's huge. I don't think anybody made as big a deal as that as they should have. And I think that's a big reason why the offenses were so unstoppable there for a minute. It also had to do with just the fact that the cycle came around that so many great receivers and quarterbacks were coming through the pipe there for a minute, and that it just seemed like defense was dead in college football. But I think this new rule has helped defenses out a little bit. I'm not going to say defense is totally back to the way it was, and I still think that if you've got a great offense with a good O-line that can protect your quarterback, a good, really good or great quarterback and core of receivers, that's pretty hard to stop, even with the best of defenses nowadays. I'm still going to say that, and that's one reason why I really want to see some breakout players emerge for Alabama. Now, about the rest of the country, you know, Colorado's been a big story this year. It was no surprise to me that Deion beat TCU and has done what he's done there. I don't really understand why so many people were surprised by that. I mean, Deion is just a force of nature, and boy, he looks great on that sideline, doesn't he? He looks like a Hollywood superstar with those shades and everything. And he was one of my, I'm a big Braves fan. He was one of my absolute favorite Braves, Neon Deion, back in the early 90s. He was one of mine, if not favorite Braves, so I'm really happy to see him doing what he's doing. It doesn't surprise me. I would love to see him be a candidate for Nick Saban's replacement whenever that time comes, if he's available by then. Their game against USC, that really didn't surprise me all that much either, because Lincoln Riley, and it is time to have a discussion about Lincoln Riley. Is he the top tier coach that everybody has said he's been for several years now? And I understand why, because he gets a lot of wins. But the guy cannot seem to muster up any sort of defense. I know that's not his side of the ball, but good head coaches understand their weaknesses and understand how to go out and get help from coaching from other coaches to help them on the side of the ball that they're not experts in. And he's a brilliant offensive mind, but if he can't figure out how to put together a defense, and I think he's had enough time at two legitimate blue blood programs. I mean, Oklahoma and USC, it doesn't get much bigger than those programs outside of places like, maybe right now Tuscaloosa and Columbus, Ohio, historically Notre Dame, obviously, but that's about as big as it gets, USC and Oklahoma, and he's able, with the resources that those programs have, to get the players to do it. So something's going on there, and I'm just about ready to declare Lincoln Riley one of the most overrated coaches in college football right now. We'll see what happens. I could change my mind later. As far as the rest of the country goes, I put together a top four. It's kind of hard. There's so many undefeated teams right now. But there's also so many teams that I'm not ready to give a benefit of a doubt to. The first three spots I have pretty much based on resumes and what I've seen. The fourth spot is a benefit of the doubt spot. Number one, I have Florida State. I think they have the best resume of any college football team right now with their wins over Clemson and LSU. I don't think any other team has a better pair of wins than those. I think their receivers are scary. I really like their quarterback, and their defense is top notch. Now, so why wouldn't I have them at number one? And it looks like to me, I know they've still got some tough games, but it kind of feels like the meat of their schedule is already over. Like they may have gotten the worst behind them already. That remains to be seen, but it could be. Number two, I have Texas for obvious reasons as a Bama fan. I think that their defense looks really good. Steve Sarkisian is one of the, if not the best offensive mind in the sport. He's got a good quarterback. He's got really great lines on both sides of the ball, and he's got an elite receiving core. So, no mysteries as to why I have Texas at number two. Number three, I have Ohio State. I think they have a pretty good pair of wins. I know that everybody noticed the Notre Dame win, but they're not getting enough credit for that opener against Indiana. That's a road Big Ten team, or a road Big Ten game. In the opener, that's a little bit hairy. That would have made me nervous if I was an Ohio State fan, and they handled it pretty easily. So that's why I have them at number three. And now number four could have gone to a lot of different teams. I know that the media always seems to want the east side of the country to pay attention to the Pac-12. Have you ever noticed that? And they always make it seem like the only reason we don't is because they play late and we're asleep, and that definitely has something to do with it. But to me, a bigger part that we haven't paid a whole lot of attention to the Pac-12 is because they haven't had a legitimate contender in almost 20 years now. Oregon's been good. They've sent teams to national championship games, weren't able to pull it off. During the playoff era, I think the Pac-12 has only had two teams go. I know we played Washington in a semifinal game one day, and we didn't have a great offense that year. That was Jalen Hurts' freshman year. We didn't have a really good offense against good defenses. I know we put up good numbers against patsies, but that's another story. And we still managed to win that game pretty easily. They couldn't do anything against our defense that year. And Oregon went the first year and actually beat Florida State in the semifinals and went on to play Ohio State in the championship, and Ohio State just wiped the floor with them in the championship game. So, until the Pac-12 can prove, and the way they prove it is to go out there and do it. And so we're not going to get that evidence until the end of the season. So stop begging us to pay attention to the Pac-12, and I'm just not going to buy into the fact that they're the best league in college football right now. There's a lot of football left to be played, but I will give you that a lot of them are still undefeated, and kudos to them for that. So I'm not going to give any of those teams the benefit of the doubt for the number 4 spot. I'm not going to give Michigan the benefit of the doubt for the number 4 spot because all they've been able to do is beat Ohio State. They've gotten into the semifinals twice now. They got embarrassed by Georgia last year, and then they got embarrassed by TCU 2 years ago by Georgia, and then last year by TCU. TCU had no business even being in that playoff, and then Michigan, a supposed blue blood powerhouse, allows them to beat them. They should be embarrassed of themselves for that, so there's no way I'm giving Michigan the benefit of the doubt on that one. Number 4, I got Georgia. Georgia deserves the benefit of the doubt. They are the two-time, not defending because that's not the way it works in college football, but they've won the last 2 national championships. They're still undefeated. They just came off a huge road win over Auburn, in my opinion, the toughest place to play in America. So Georgia's going to get my benefit of the doubt for the number 4 spot. Now, I'm going to go on to talk about this Alabama A&M game. Obviously, it's a gigantic game. There's a good chance at the end of the season we'll look back on this as the SEC West championship game. But what we know for sure right now is it's for control of the SEC West because there's 2 teams left that have control of their own destinies, and that's Bama and A&M. And after Saturday, there will only be one team in the West that controls its own destiny, and it's going to be the winner of this ball game. Now, I feel uncomfortably confident about this game. Big fans of teams probably understand what I'm talking about. I feel like I should be really, really scared of this team. Jimbo has had our number for the last couple of years. Now, last year, a lot of that has to do with the fact that we had to play our backup quarterback, but that's neat. You know, we should have won that game comfortably. We did everything within our power to give them that game and still managed to come away with a squeaker of a win there at the end. And obviously, they beat us in their place 2 years ago. So I should be really, really scared of this game. I'm just not. And I'll tell you why. The big reason why has nothing to do with X's and O's or anything like that. The teams look evenly matched to me, but it's because Texas A&M has played well this year. You know, we all know that A&M has recruited well, probably as good as anybody outside of Athens and Tuscaloosa in the SEC the last few years. So everybody knows they have talent. But the problem is, the last couple of years coming into the Alabama game, they've played so badly early on that, you know, Nick Saban was in that position where he had to convince his guys that this is a good ball team and they're really going to have to play their best game and they're really going to have their best focused and their best intensity in order to win this ball game. And it's just really, really difficult to do that with 18 to 22-year-old guys that are great athletes like they are and feel as though they're on the best team in America, which I'm sure all the Bama players feel that way. It's just really hard when you don't have any hard evidence. All you've got are the number of stars next to guys' names in recruiting lists, and it's really hard to motivate young people when that's what you're working with. Well, he's got plenty to work with this year. Texas A&M looks good. They're pretty much in the same boat that Alabama is. They've had almost identical seasons. They lost early non-conference games to really good non-conference opponents who are still undefeated as we speak and have improved since then. So they look even, and Nick Saban's going to have plenty of motivation to work with. Alabama should have, or Texas A&M should have Alabama's full attention going into this game. The fact that it's on the road worries me a little bit. I know we had a little bit of practice in Starkville Saturday, but Starkville and Kyle Field, Davis Wade Stadium and Kyle Field are certainly 2 different animals. I know everybody talks about the cowbells, but they do have to shut those up when the actual play is happening, which I'll be honest, I did not know until I watched the broadcast Saturday. I'd never really picked up on that they stopped doing that. And I think it's actually kind of cool that they're so good at doing it because I started to notice it after they mentioned it. But so they don't have the cowbell. So we're talking about 60,000 voices as opposed to 100,000 voices yelling as the play's going on. That's a big difference. So I'm worried about that. But the only really schematic thing that I'm worried about in the game from Texas A&M, I don't expect either team to go in there and roll up 250 yards rushing and dominate that way. But, Petrino's a great play caller, and if Max Johnson gets a hot hand, like we mentioned earlier with Kiffin and Jackson Dart, if Max Johnson gets a hot hand and Petrino gets hot calling plays, then we could be in trouble, and we could definitely wind up losing this ball game. But that's, I hate to say that's the only thing that I can imagine, the only way I can imagine us losing the ball game. Because that's not really true. I mean, Milroe could play a terrible game. We had all those turnovers in that game last year against them. Will Reichard missed 2 kicks against them last year. So we don't anticipate those sort of things happening, but you never know. And it's like I said, that's just why I feel uncomfortable that I'm pretty confident going into this game. But we talked about it earlier. The X factor is there. We are overdue, in my opinion, at Alabama to have a breakout offensive skill player game, and maybe it'll come from one of the receivers. Maybe Justice Haynes gets some significant playing time in this ball game, and he's able to pull it off. But a breakout game from a guy like that could be the difference in a very close toss-up sort of game to a comfortable win for Alabama, in my opinion. And so we're hoping that's what happens. But hey, our backs are against the wall every game this year. This is a big game, but even if we win it, we've still got a lot of work to do. That Kentucky, I know I kind of poo-pooed Kentucky a little bit, but they are a good team, and I acknowledge that. And the fact that we're playing them on the road late in the season this year makes me very nervous. Just the fact that we're playing an East team that late in the season, I have no memories of that ever happening before, at least since I've been watching Alabama football. So that makes me a little bit nervous. And obviously playing Auburn and Jordan-Hare terrifies me, no matter what the circumstances are. So, win or lose, we've still got a lot of work to go this year. But a win against this team in this situation is going to be huge for our SEC West championship aspirations. And right now, I think realistic Alabama fans, that's what our goal should be. Our goal should be to get to Atlanta, to beat Auburn for the 4th straight time, which, by the way, nobody talks about this, but that hasn't happened since a guy wearing a houndstooth hat was on the sidelines at Alabama. So I'm very excited about that prospect happening. 4 straight in the Iron Bowl for Bama. But, we're not quite to the halfway point. Things are starting to come into shape. It's getting very exciting. This is a huge game next week, and I'm very excited about it, and hope you are too. Thanks for watching.